Hello, listeners, and thanks for tuning in to this very special episode of Buffalo Lab Radio Free. I'm your host, Eunice Randall. Today we're trying something new. Obviously, this is BarCamp Buffalo, and I'm doing my talk as kind of an episode of my show. So let me give you a brief intro to my show for those of you who may not be familiar about it. Buffalo Lab Radio Free is a video podcast that wants to be a radio show. We broadcast right here out of the Foundry. We're oriented around maker culture. We do tutorials, do-it-yourself projects. We talk about new technology. We like to go to hacker spaces, maker spaces. We like to go to maker fairs. And we like to cover our local makerspace here at Buffalo Lab and the kind of projects that people are working on here and at the Foundry. So I'm excited to do BarCamp because it's giving me a chance to talk about something slightly different than the format that we normally do on the show. I want to get a little bit meta about my medium. And so my talk is called Old Media is Not Dead. We're pretty much all tech people here, so I think it's pretty safe to say that we have an appreciation for new media. The internet's pretty great. It's great for a lot. Thank you, yes. Please applaud for me and the internet. The internet is great for lots of reasons. There's practically unlimited content on the internet. There's open communication channels worldwide. You can talk to people everywhere. There's a crazy low barrier to entry to share your own content. All you have to do is go on and post it, and it's out there. But there's also drawbacks to the web as a medium. Oversaturation is a huge problem on the internet. You can't possibly see everything on the internet. There's no way. It's hard to sift through it and find the quality content in the sea of mediocrity and just subpar content. Anyone can publish anything they want. Not all of it's good. And if yours is good, sometimes being good isn't enough to get you noticed because you get lost in the sea of just crap, honestly. Another downside about it is that because the internet is so pervasive as a medium, it's killing other mediums. It's driving other stuff towards irrelevancy. Are we okay with letting other mediums being driven towards irrelevancy? There are lots of reasons why we shouldn't be okay with that. Marshall McLuhan was a philosopher in the late 60s, focusing mainly on communication theory. He coined the phrase, "the medium is the message." So that's describing a symbiotic relationship between art and content and the medium and the format you choose to present it in. You can't separate them because they're inherently connected. Your art is inherently embedded in the format you choose, and it affects the way people interpret your message. So obviously, if you agree with this, the McLuhan way of thinking, choosing the right medium is super important. It's going to change your entire project. And it's only going to be a good thing for art if we have more choices to go to. Returning to old mediums has a lot of benefits. It can make you seem more interesting. It can set your content apart. Every format's different. Every format's going to have special things about it that are unlike other formats. I'm going to focus on a couple of them. Radio and print magazine are my two favorite formats. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's special about them. Radio is completely different than a lot of other mediums because it's audio only. And that gives you a very different opportunity because you're not constrained by what's possible when you do radio. You get to paint a different picture. Well, what does that actually mean? Well, for news, it means that you're seeing action even if there's not footage of it. I saw Ira Glass do a talk about radio a few months ago, and he talked about this. I hadn't thought about it this way, and it's really clever. He told an anecdote about a story he did about a tornado and how he interviewed the people who were in this house when the tornado, and they're talking about, we were in the house, it picked it up, we were in the air. They don't have footage of that. They weren't there when the tornado hit. If you're watching that on the news, you're seeing a family standing among rubble. Okay, I get it. A tornado came through here. But if you're listening to that on the radio, you're seeing the house in the air while it's happening. For storytelling, it makes radio a really accessible, lo-fi medium. You can tell a story even if you don't have the resources for the special effects that you need. It's all in your listener's mind. So it opens up a lot of other opportunities. When it comes to print, I'm really into Zine Culture, which, I mean, that's even more than radio dying in popularity. But let's face it, when you have something in your hands, it's like a very different experience than going onto a blog. It encourages hands-on in a couple different ways. First, in the making of the zine, you know, it's really lo-fi. You're doing hand drawings, a lot of time collages. It causes for a different kind of product at the end than if you're doing something digitally. It's also hands-on in the distribution. People, like, you're going out, you're handing it out, you're trading with other people. It establishes a sense of community, and not the same kind of community that you get on the internet. It's not like the passive act of commenting on a blog post or retweeting something. It's encouraging people to be active together. So the good news is that I don't think new media has to kill old media. I think they can coexist and actually benefit from each other. For example, zine trading communities have popped up on the internet. People post what they've made and say, like, you know, do you want to see it? And then people mail each other things. Snail mail is not dead either. Not quite. I'm personally collaborating on a zine with a bunch of people from Kansas City. We have a Facebook group, and we all work on it together. Podcasting has been a huge boon to radio. As a podcaster, I get really excited about this. First of all, podcasts can take existing radio shows and make them more accessible, more flexible, get more listeners. I don't have time to listen to the radio at a certain time every day, but you can go on and download This American Life. It's like the most popular podcast in the country. It also has an opportunity for people to get more creative with the format and do kind of things that haven't been done before, haven't been expected. My favorite podcast is called Welcome to Night Vale. It is in the format of an old radio show, so it's like a radio broadcaster talking at you about what's happening in your city where you live. Even though it's not technically strictly radio, it's bringing back the concept of radio to new listeners. So what is it that we can do to not let old media die? We can get excited about it. We can support each other. I have an anecdote here, another anecdote about Ira Glass and how he personally hurt my feelings. Because he did this whole talk on radio, and I'm like, yeah, radio, great, I love radio. And he actually, it came up in his talk about zines, and he was like, nobody writes zines anymore. In front of everybody at UB, I'm like, excuse me? It's really important to support each other when not a lot of people work in your medium. Protecting old formats is kind of like protecting dying languages. The best way to do it is to just use them as much as you can in your regular life. Make awesome content on your chosen medium. Share your awesome content. Get people excited about it. Do something new and inspirational. Get other people inspired to do something new and inspirational. I don't know how to end my talk. I'm really nervous about doing live radio because that's a new format for me. I'm recording this and it's going to go on my website. But thanks everyone for coming out. Are there any comments, questions? I don't know. Thank you. Thanks to the Foundry, BarCamp. My website is BLRF.org. It stands for Buffalo Lab Radio Free. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr. My Twitter is Radio Free Eunice. This is going to be on there in the next week or so. So, yes.
Can you talk about the cost of entry? What's the cost of getting to it? What's the minimum? What kind of equipment do you use?
Okay, so this is a cost of entry question. The thing about old mediums is they can be there's a definite spectrum on how lo-fi or high-tech you want to be on it. Zines, a lot of zines that even now that I am involved with are literally just people drawing things out, making copies at Kinko, stapling them together, and handing them out or selling them for $1. Then some of my friends that have been into it for a while, are making these nice publications, and they're nice, and they're really great. And it's more about the content though for me. So I like a $1 zine that's printed on loose leaf paper just as much. For podcasting, there is like an equipment, kind of entry equipment kind of thing, but it just depends on basically how nice you need it to be. You can get started on a computer that has a microphone. Most computers have microphones. Matt lent me my microphone. It's very exciting. But I mean, at this point, technology is getting so cheap that you can get pretty good stuff, and you can get started and upgrade your stuff later. That's the way I think of it. So.
Okay, so there's a sea of low quality stuff out there.
Okay.
Evidenced by YouTube. so assuming that you want some like high quality, awesome media, how do you have any like strategies that you use as to going out and finding that stuff, like the diamonds in the rough?
Oh, like when?
Yeah.
It's a question about. I'm repeating the question because I'm gonna put this up. It's a question about finding good content. How to find good content in the sea of mediocrity. Yes. I mean, things spread by word of mouth on the internet. If you just go on YouTube and you're like, I'm gonna look for something cool. I find like every time I do that, I find nothing cool. But the cool stuff that I find is, someone tells me, hey, did you see this podcast? I love it. Did you see, your friends are telling you see it on Twitter. Twitter is like where I get all my news. I'm kind of a freak about it. And people post their stuff, and I said it's hard to get noticed even if your stuff is good, which is true. But good quality stuff, gets talked about. And if you hear something being talked about and there's buzz about it, that's like when I check out new things.
So, one of the problem and reason old media is dying is distribution.
Reason what is dying?
Old media.
Media, okay.
Because of distribution.
Yes.
So, if you have a radio station, maybe only people in flat block radius can hear you. If you make a scene, only people that you physically can hand it to can see you. So you see old media living on by merging to new media.
Yeah, I think that's it's a question about distribution of old media and physical constraints with radio and trading zines. No, I definitely do see it living on through the internet. I think that that's a great way to connect with other people. I mean, I consider myself a radio host or whatever, but like it's a YouTube show. It's not a radio show. It's not on the radio. It's on YouTube. But I think it's fun to, throw back and be like, let's do this like old radio. Let's do this like simulating medias and kind of creating hybrids rather than letting them completely die out. I think that's really important. And I think if you use the internet the right way, it's a huge boon to connecting with other people who still work in that format.
I was thinking about how old media too was a one-way medium where the internet is sort of a two-way thing.
That's a really good point.
And I'm wondering what that's like for you. Do you cultivate a relationship with your audience, or you've been doing these podcasts for a while, and how do you manage that?
I mean, like I said, my podcasts are posted on the internet, so I get the benefit of the two-way streak of the internet. I do get to communicate with people, comments, emails. I would say my experience with Zine Culture has been a little bit more interesting in that. It's a little bit harder to kind of cultivate that. You drop off zines at a bookstore, you hope people pick them up. But especially in a city like Buffalo, you do get some feedback. I meet other zine people at like the Western New York Small Press Book Fair every year. People get out the tables and hand out their zine, and I get to go like pick up zines directly from the people who make them, talk to them, tell them about what I've been working on. One time I was in Elmwood Village and I was just walking around, and this guy I didn't know had a backpack with a bunch of buttons on it, and he had like my zine's buttons on his backpack, and I was like, hey, I made those, and he was like, really? I got them at Rust Belt Books, and I'm like, yes. So then I get to talk to him about it, so it's not the same, but in a way it kind of like, to me it's when you don't have the two-way communication open all the time, it's kind of like more exciting and more meaningful when you do get to get feedback from people. So there's definitely pros and cons to it, but I think that it can still be beneficial in that way. Well, I hope everybody... Oh, one more.
So how do you set a standard of quality for yourself?
How do you what?
Set a standard of quality for yourself.
The question was how you set your own standard of quality for yourself. I guess it's like kind of personal to me. I've had actually really like personal issues with that because I feel like, oh, you know, this episode's bad, I'm not going to post it. And then I don't post an episode for 2 months, and I'm like, man, now there's nothing on my website. I'm actually already standing up here thinking about that, like, oh, I'm stuttering on the tape, I don't want to post it. And it's like, no, you got to post it, because if you don't post it, then nobody's going to hear it at all. So I think it's a balance. Like, obviously you want your stuff to be high quality, but you also want to get your content out there. If your content is high quality, I think it's okay to have like a learning curve on like the medium around it. You know, I've been doing my podcast for a few months now, and I think it's pretty good, but I'm hoping that in a year I'm going to come back and look at my first episodes and be like, man, these are so bad. But it's good if you look at on your old stuff and say it's bad, you're making progress. That's a good thing. So it's better to make progress and do things. Another Ira Glass quote. Make and put out things, and a lot of them are going to be crap, but some of them are going to be good, and eventually you're going to be happy that you put all that out there. So.
Well, Ira Glass is a great example because he'll tell you it's crappy for years.
Yep.
Yeah.
That quote is on my website for my podcast. Ira Glass is my hero. The War of Art.
Yeah, this talks pretty much exactly about that, and it's really good.
I'll have to check it out.
It's short read, it's like 80 pages long.
Do you know the author?
I can't think off the top of my head. So.
Okay, that's okay. Also, one of the books, Marshall McLuhan wrote a book called The Medium is the Message, which I would recommend checking out if you can find a copy of it. It's pretty old, but it's a really cool book. It uses the book format medium really well because it's kind of like almost like a scrapbook kind of collage in book form. So it's really, really interesting. So I would recommend that too. But generic pleasantries, thank you for listening.